Chapter 23, wherein we are permitted to observe the admirable character of Bouchotte, who resists violence, but yields to love. After that, let no one call the author a misogynist. On coming away from the Baron Everdingen's prince, Istar went to have a few oysters and a bottle of white wine at an eating house in the market. Then, being prudent as well as powerful, he paid a visit to his friend Théophile Valais, for his pockets were full of bombs, and he wanted to secrete them in the musician's cupboard. The composer, Aline, queen of Golconda, was not at home. However, the Carib found Bouchotte busily working up the role of Siguil, for the young artist was booked to play the principal part in Le Apache, the operetta that was being rehearsed in one of the big music halls. The part in question was that of a streetwalker who, by her obscene gestures, lures a passer-by into a trap, and then, while her victim is being gagged and bound, repeats with fiendish cruelty the lascivious motions by which he had been led astray. The part required that she could appear both as mime and singer, and she was in a state of high enthusiasm about it. The accompanist had just left. Prince Istar seated himself at the piano, and Bouchotte resumed her task. Her movements were unseemly and delicious. Her tawny hair was flying in all directions in wild, disordered curls. Her skin was moist. It exhaled a scent of violets and alkaline salts, which made the nostrils throb. Even she herself felt the intoxication. Suddenly inebriated with her intoxicating presence, Prince Istar arose, and with never a word or look, caught her into his arms and drew her onto the couch, the little couch with the flowered tapestry which Théophile had procured at one of the big shops by promising to pay 10 francs a month for a long term of years. Now, Istar might have solicited Bouchotte's favors. He might have invited her to a rapid and, withal, a mutual embrace, and despite her preoccupation and excitement, she would not have refused him. But Bouchotte was a girl of spirit. The merest hint of coercion awoke all her untamable pride. She would consent of her own accord, yes, but be mastered, never. She would readily yield to love, curiosity, pity, to less than that even, but she would die rather than yield the force. Her surprise immediately gave place to fury. She fought her aggressor with all her heart and soul, with nails to which fury lent an added edge. She tore at the cheeks and eyelids of the Carib, and though he held her as in a vice, she arched herself so stiffly and made such excellent play with knee and elbow that the human-headed bull, blinded with blood and rage, was sent crashing into the piano, which gave forth a prolonged groan, while the bombs, tumbling out of his pockets, fell on the floor with a noise like thunder, and Bouchotte, with dishevelled locks and one breast bare, beautiful and terrible, stood brandishing the poker over the prostrate giant, crying, "Be off with you, or I'll put your eyes out." Prince Istar went to wash himself in the kitchen and plunged his gory visage into a basin where some haricot beans lay soaking. Then he withdrew without anger or resentment, for he had a noble soul. Scarcely had he gone when the doorbell rang, Bouchotte calling upon the absent maid in vain. slipped on a dressing gown, and opened the door herself. A young man, very correct in appearance, and rather good-looking, bowed politely, and apologizing for having to introduce himself, gave his name. It was Maurice d'Espervieux. Maurice was still seeking his guardian angel. Upheld by a desperate hope, he sought him in the queerest places. He inquired for him at the houses of sorcerers, magicians, and thaumaturgists, who, in filthy hovels, laid bare the ineffable secrets of the future, and who, thought masters of all the treasures of the earth, wore trousers without any seats to them, any pig's brains. That very day, having been to a back street in Montmartre to consult a priest of Satan who practiced black magic by piercing waxen images, Maurice had gone on to Bouchotte's, having been sent by Madame de la Verdelier, who, being about to give a fete in aid of the fund for the preservation of country churches, was anxious to secure Bouchotte's services, since she had suddenly become, no one knew why, a fashionable artiste. Bouchotte invited the visitor to sit down on the little flowered couch. At his request, she seated herself beside him, and our young man of fashion explained to the singer what Madame de la Verdelier desired of her. The lady wished Bouchotte to sing one of those Apache songs which were giving such delight in the fashionable world. Unfortunately, Madame de la Verdelier could only offer a very modest fee, one out of all proportion to the merits of the artist. But then, it was for a good cause. Bouchotte agreed to take part, and accepted the reduced fee with the accustomed liberality of the poor towards the rich, and of artists towards society people. Bouchotte was not a selfish girl. The work for the preservation of country churches interested her. She remembered with sobs and tears her first communion, and she still retained her faith. When she passed by a church, she wanted to enter it, especially in the evening. And so she did not love the Republic, which had done its utmost to destroy both the church and the army. Her heart rejoiced to see the rebirth of national sentiment. France was lifting up her head. What was most applauded in the music halls were songs about the soldiers and the kind nuns. Meanwhile, Maurice inhaled the odor of her tawny hair and the subtle, bitter perfume of her body, all the odors of her person, and desire grew in him. He felt her near him on the little couch, very warm and very soft. He complimented the artiste on her great talent. She asked him what he liked best in all her repertory. He knew nothing about it, still he made replies that satisfied her. She had dictated them herself without knowing it. The vain creature spoke of her talent, of her success, and she wished others to speak of them. She never ceased talking of her triumphs. Yet withal she was candor itself. Maurice, in all sincerity, praised Bouchotte's beauty, her fresh skin, her purity of line. He attributed this advantage to the fact that she never made up and never put messes on her face. As to her figure, she admitted that there was enough everywhere, and none too much. And to illustrate this assertion, she passed her hand over all the contours of her charming body, rising lightly to follow the delightful curves on which she reposed. Maurice was quite moved by it. It began to grow dark. She offered to light up. He begged her to do nothing of the sort. Their talk at first, joyous and full of laughter, grew more intimate and very sweet, with a certain languor in its tone. It seemed to Bouchotte that she had known Monsieur Maurice d'Esparvu for a long time, and holding him for a man of delicacy, she gave him her confidence. She told him that she was by nature a good woman, but that she had a grasping and an unscrupulous mother. Maurice recalled her to the consideration of her own beauty, and exalted by subtle flattery the excellent opinion she had of herself, patient and calculating in spite of the burning desire growing in him. He aroused and increased in the desired one the longing to be still further admired. The dressing gown opened and slipped down of its own accord. The living satin of her shoulders gleamed in the mysterious light of evening. He, so prudent, so clever, so adroit, let her sink in his arms, ardent and half swooning before she had even perceived she had granted anything at all. Their breath and their murmurs intermingled, and the little flowery couch sighed in sympathy with them. When they recovered the power to express their feelings in words, she whispered in his ears that his cheek was even softer than her own. He answered, holding her embraced. It is charming to hold you like this. One would think you had no bones. She replied, closing her eyes. It is because I love you. Love seems to dissolve my bones. It makes me as soft and melting as a pig's foot, à la sta, Manabuld. Hereupon Theophile came in, and Bouchotte called upon him to thank Monsieur Maurice d'Esparvu, who had been amiable enough to be the bearer of a handsome offer from Madame la Comtesse de la Verdelier. The musician was happy, feeling the quiet and peace of the house after a day of fruitless applications, of colorless lessons, of failure and humiliation. Three new collaborators had been thrust upon him who would add their signatures to his operetta and receive their share of the author's rights. And he had been told to introduce the tango into the court of Golconda. He pressed young d'Esparvu's hand and dropped wearily on the little couch, which, being now at the end of its strength, gave way to the four legs and suddenly collapsed. And the angel, precipitated to the ground, rolled, terror-struck, onto the watch, matchbox, and cigarette case that had fallen from Maurice's pocket, and on to the bombs Prince Istar had left behind him. Now, even if it was a good example throughout or whatever, being able to bring up the example of one good person, you could say, of a group doesn't mean that you're not prejudiced against that group. So the title kind of gives away as much as it does otherwise. And, we're presenting somebody as the paramount of a good woman or something like that. And, things moving so quickly, right? Like there can't be a bigger relationship. Like it's just, okay, how you deal with a person is only how you're dealing with that person.